Thank you for joining me. I'm William Earnhardt, the pastor of the Bushnell, Homosassa, and Inverness, Florida Seventh-day Adventist churches. And I just want to share a couple of thoughts on today's Sabbath school lesson, talking about Jesus calming the storm. There are a couple of things that really speak to me in this very short story. And the first thing is the story begins in Mark 4:35 with Jesus telling the disciples, hey, let's cross over to the other side. Let's get in a boat and cross this lake. That's important to me because when they run into the storm, that shows me that Jesus knew full well when he said, let's cross the lake, that they were going to run into a huge storm. Many times we think God is leading us until we run into problems. And then when we start running into problems, start running into a storm, we start questioning, am I doing what God is wanting me to do? Is God leading because I'm in this storm? Well, it's important for us to realize sometimes Jesus sends us into a storm. Sometimes Jesus has a plan for our lives that will take us right through a major storm. And he's fully aware of that when he sends us on our way. And so I think that's very important for us to keep in mind, not to doubt the leading of God just because we're going through a storm. Sometimes he sends us into a storm and it's all his idea. Then, of course, we know how the story goes. The disciples are scared for their lives in this huge storm and they're pleading to Jesus, save us. And then Jesus stands up and he calms the storm. And that's wonderful. That's beautiful. But then there is something that Jesus says here that always used to kind of confuse me. He says, in verse 40, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And I always took that to mean that he was asking them, why are you afraid? Where's your faith? Don't you know I can calm the storm? And that always confused me because I thought, why is Jesus asking them where their faith was when they're the ones asking him to calm the storm? They have faith that he can calm the storm. That's why they're calling on him. So why is he asking where their faith is? And then finally, one day, it clicked. Jesus wasn't asking them, where is your faith? Don't you know I can calm the storm? What he was asking them was, where is your faith? Why do you need me to calm the storm? Why can't you just ride the storm out with me? Jesus is sleeping happily, contently in the boat in the middle of the storm, totally content to just ride this storm out. And I believe too many times I show a lack of faith. We show a lack of faith when we ask God to calm every little storm that comes our way. As a matter of fact, one time I was sharing this story at an Adventist school with a group of third graders, and one of the third grade boys asked a very profound question. He said, aren't these boats driven by the wind? Aren't sailboats driven by the wind? And I said, well, yes. And he goes, well, if there's no wind, how are the boats going to get anywhere now? And I don't know if this is where he was going with it or not, but that to me was very profound because it's the wind, it's the storm sometimes that get us to where we need to be. And if we ask Jesus to calm every little storm that comes our way, we're never going to get anywhere. I just got back from a trip to New York City. I'm flying on the plane, and we ran into some turbulence. And immediately when we hit the turbulence, I could tell who it was used to being on an airplane and who wasn't. Because I'm reading while the turbulence hits, and I noticed the person next to me became quite concerned, quite fidgety, quite scared. While I looked around and the rest of us were just quietly listening to our music, reading our books, riding out the turbulence, because we've been on planes before. We know you run into turbulence and everything's going to be fine. I wish I had as much faith in the storms of life, that when turbulence hits in the storms of life, that instead of getting all scared and worked up about it, just like when I'm on an airplane, know that everything's going to be fine. This happens. Ride the storm out. That's why I believe it's very important for us to remember it was Jesus's idea to cross the lake, knowing they would run into a major storm. And also realize that when Jesus was asking them, "Where's your faith? Why were you so afraid?" I don't believe he was asking them, "Where was your faith? Don't you know I can calm the storm?" I think he was asking them, "Where is your faith? Why do you even need me to calm the storm? Why can't you just ride the storm out with me?" Friends, I want to be with Jesus wherever he is, even if that means in the middle of a storm. I just want to be with Jesus. And Jesus has been with us and always will be. He's promised to never leave us or forsake us. Do we need the faith that he can calm a storm? Sure. But I think what is even greater is having the faith to know that we don't need him to calm the storm. We can just ride the storm out with him. We just always want to be with Jesus because he loves us, he cares for us, and he will always be with us through the storms of life. And again, sometimes it's those storms that get us to where we need to be. God bless you as you continue to follow Jesus.